Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. I'm your host, Edgar Mills. Thank you for joining us. Hello, America. Welcome to episode 66. Thanks for staying with me. I appreciate you all. So today we are talking about, the American spirit, American character, and some of the people that influenced the shaping of said character and spirit, and that still kind of shapes us today. Independence Day was this past weekend, and I saw a lot of patriotism out there, and that was awesome. I'm here for it. And I also saw the mayor of New York deliver a very carefully worded lecture suggesting that we redefine America for the newest of us, the newest immigrants coming in. And that's, I don't think that's right. I think that's in contradiction to all the influential humans who shaped America thus far. So, America was built on a mix of very bold ideas. I mean, especially from its earliest founding, right? Declaring independence from England, or Great Britain, but there was a lot of, courage for sure, independence for sure, but also common sense. And that often gets overlooked, the common sense piece of that. And none of those were abstract ideas or intangibles, right? They were crafted and shaped by real men who lived out those ideals and practically applied them in everyday life. And we'll talk about some of these men as we go. And we'll look at what the men that we're going to discuss. We're going to look at each one and what they gave us and how you still see the influence in everyday American life. And it's ideas like, self-reliance, standing on your own 2 feet, right? Fighting for real freedom. That's an early idea. Even in the Declaration of Independence, when we say all men are created equal, and we weren't living that, right? But still, one of the grievances preceding the Declaration of Independence, one of the grievances, and I want to say it was from Thomas Jefferson, talked specifically about slaves being fully human, fully free men, or they should be. Anyway, and then functional character, right? Building your own character, improving yourself in a functional and practical way. And then also, some of these ideas we're going to hit on is using plain talk, straight talk, or as I like to say, direct communication, and even some humor to kind of cut through the noise, nonsense. So we're going to start with the idea of self-reliance. So Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote an essay in 1841, and it was called Self-Reliance. And in that, it gave us a very famous literary line that goes like this: "Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string." Yeah, trust thyself. He wasn't telling people to be selfish, and he wasn't telling people to go rely on someone else. He was saying that each and every one of us already have, a built-in moral compass to know the difference from right and wrong, regardless of what we see around us. And he certainly didn't believe that we needed to look to institutions or the opinion of the masses to tell us what's right or to help us along our way. And that idea alone, I believe, helped to create the sort of distinctly American habit of questioning authority and trusting your own gut. And you can see the effects of that in every single self-help book or podcast or whatever else, talking about listening to your inner voice and whatnot. So it's there. Ralph Waldo Emerson, 1841. We see those influences every single day. That's distinctly American. It's uniquely American. And on a side note, so speaking of trusting your inner instinct, there's a guy, Gavin de Becker, and he's the founder of a enormous security firm who does high-end personal protection, bodyguard type stuff for, government officials, movie stars, all the things. And what he said, and I'm going to paraphrase him, but that our intuition it's subconscious, right? And it acts fast, and that our intuition is able to process subtle little cues and inconsistencies faster than our consciousness can. So in the context of security, that helps us to identify danger before you even really know why. There might not be anything overt happening, but you sense that there's a problem. And he calls that knowing without knowing why. And yeah. So ultimately what he said, and I think one of his books is called The Gift of Fear, but true fear is a gift, right? That sharpens our intuition. Well, and that's in the context of security. But we have that intuition also about the way we treat people and about the way we interact with people. If somebody's greasy or not. Well, you have an intuition. Now, you may be wrong. If you're coming from a judgmental position because we can shape our intuition. Yeah, we can shape it, and we can train our intuition, and we can train our subconscious to a degree. So yeah, I think that same concept applies when it comes to the American character, when it comes to developing our own character. But as we develop our own character, even as rugged individualists, we are a part of the bigger picture, America. Anyway, that was a little side note. Gavin de Becker, I don't agree with him on every single thing, but he is an authority in security. And intelligent, very seasoned, very experienced. All right. And moving on. So that was Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he had an impact. Who else? Well, one of the most influential human beings in American history is Benjamin Franklin. And he took that same idea of self-reliance and, well, he made it practical, didn't he? And he's got an autobiography that it's a quick read. It's not too long. But he also contributed, I think was a founder of Poor Richard's Almanac. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Poor Richard's Almanac became the Farmer's Almanac, if I'm not mistaken. I may be. But Benjamin Franklin took big ideas and turned them into systems, man. Do you know what I'm saying? Into functional systems. And for example, he wrote out like these 13 virtues and a few: temperance, order, industry, sincerity, and so on. And he had a daily journal, Benjamin Franklin did. So there's your first step right there. That's taking the idea of self-reliance, but self-improvement, and then creating a functional way to, track that, really. And he did. He kept a journal, tracking his progress of when he was and was not hitting these virtues. So he didn't just talk about being better. He built habits and systems to be better. And he is an example, folks. I don't care what you think about Ben Franklin. Yeah, he might have been a boozer and he might have been a whore chaser, but that don't make him stupid and that don't make him a bad person. He was a brilliant, brilliant human being. If not for Ben Franklin and the Junto Club, the original Junto Club, what did that bring us? Yeah, public library, the fire department, and never mind all the countless inventions that Ben Franklin, lightning rod. Do you know that Ben Franklin invented swim fins, flippers that you put on your feet? Yeah, man, crazy stuff. So when we today celebrate a self-made man, somebody who started from nothing and built himself up, that's the Ben Franklin playbook right there. There's influence, and it's here today. It's still with us today. So don't hate it because it's something from the old days. I see that as being a tactic of sort of, well, I'm going to say the left. I ain't meaning to go political here, but that's a bit of a tactic. Everything from, excuse me, everything from our founding fathers, because slavery existed, they want to invalidate everything that was built. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, really. It's not logical and practical to do that. And we're not going to remake America based on the fact that you don't like old stuff, old white guys. Yeah. Well, speaking of slavery, Booker T. Washington, he espoused the same principle of self-reliance and same principles of self-reliance and self-improvement, but under tougher conditions, right? He was born into slavery. But what happened ultimately? He founded the Tuskegee Institute and became an author. And most notably up from slavery. But he had a core message that I think is, you can see it today in many institutions or many organizations or groups, but it's notably absent also in a few of these groups, these political groups. And that his core message was that dignity comes from strong character, and he promoted that you build useful and practical skills and work hard, and that you not wait for someone else or the government to hand you a thing or to do a thing for you. Yeah, that's Booker T. Washington. And he built one of the most prominent models of vocational education in America and gave especially black people a very positive, productive path forward. And so today, in modern times, when people talk about personal responsibility and learning a trade or a skill to change your life, yeah, they're speaking the language of Booker T. Washington. And I think that resonates even more today with vocation over academic, theory, like practical vocation over academic theory. Yeah. So, moving on. The idea that real freedom means freedom for everyone. Now, Mom Donnie alluded to this in his Independence Day lecture, but does he believe it? And does it mean what he thinks it means, what I think it means? So we're going to look at, Frederick Douglass. He was an escaped slave and ultimately became one of the greatest speakers and writers in American history. And the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, he rightly demanded that the same natural rights listed in the Declaration of Independence belong to him and every other enslaved person. Yeah. And he also believed that education was a path forward and that moral courage was a path forward and a way to get out of the bondages of slavery. And I mean institutionally as well as individually. So, and what he did was forced the country to face the contradiction of what America said it stood for on paper versus what it practiced. And again, I'm here for it. Every political commentator you see today, well, correction, every independent, truly independent political commentator you see, or all the political podcasts, they call out the contradictions every day. And, the left happens to be a target-rich environment for hypocrisy, irony, contradiction. But don't confuse me, folks. The right is up there as well. And the current administration is up there as well, as has been all other administrations in the past. But the means, the willingness to call out the contradictions, well, that comes partly from Frederick Douglass. So when we're talking today about equal dignity and opportunity and all that stuff, we're still using the moral standard, even though it may be manipulated a little bit, modern. We're still using the moral standard and the language that Frederick Douglass helped to establish back then. Yeah. So the influences, the question is, do you know where these influences come from? And if you cite someone from the 60s or whatever, where does their influence come from, though? Because in the 60s, nothing new was happening, right? By then, we were just going off older philosophies. Now, some of the guys I'm talking about today, they were very familiar with the philosophies of the Stoics, Seneca or Marcus Aurelius or Aristotle or whoever. So a lot of these men, though slaves or though born and raised in the South, whatever, education is an individual event. Yeah, you have to see, and even if you're in a collective, you individually have to choose to engage. Because I can go along with the mass. I can jump into a crowd and mill about without ever having engaged my brain whatsoever. And partly I think that might be why people are in the masses. They like being an anonymous, faceless, voiceless number, I guess. I guess it's low pressure. You don't have to think much. So on the same note of that individual freedom and the rightness that all men are equal, coming at it from a completely different angle, Mark Twain tackled that same concept through the eyes of Huckleberry Finn. Now, Huck was a poor white boy, right? And so he had to make the decision whether or not to turn in an escaped slave, Jim. But as the story goes, you see that Huck is realizing in his own gut, his own instinct was telling him that Jim he's a human being. He's not 3/5, right? He's a human being. And that's the struggle there, or the realization. And yeah, Mark Twain, what I like, because I enjoy Mark Twain, he uses humor a lot throughout his book. Now, it's humor of the time, right? He used the vernacular of the time and the place, but it's still funny. But the book itself is driven by the more serious question, right? Do societal norms and societal rules and Airfinger's quote respectability, does that make otherwise decent people do wrong things? Well, that's a much smaller scale of asking, can a mob rule or collectivism consume individual thought and discernment? And you already know what my answer is. That's a big emphatic yes. So social norms can make otherwise decent people do wrong things. And we all know, folks, just because a thing is legal doesn't make it right. There's a moral standard. You guys see that all this comes back to rugged individualism. Think for yourself. So Mark Twain used plain speech and humor to expose hypocrisy. And he did it without preaching to us as well. It was entertaining. And that book, by the way, is still taught in schools, and because it makes readers, well, a little uncomfortable, a little uneasy. You got to think in a reflective way. You got to reflect, like, oh man, what would I do? What was right? What was wrong? And it makes us, ask what we really believe. When the universally correct answer of the time is wrong, or it feels wrong. So we got to ask ourselves, what do we believe? That's where the goodness of that book is. So he did a similar thing to what Frederick Douglass did. Frederick Douglass did it via Christianity, comparing the freedoms stated in the Declaration of Independence to the biblical standard. And he didn't use humor, right? Whereas Mark Twain did the same thing via humor. Well, I don't say humor so much as wit. Yeah, I think wit is the better word there. But humor, along with, I'm going to say plain talk, but direct plain talk, sprinkled in with a little bit of humor, or a little bit of wit, and maybe even a little bit of sarcasm. Yeah. That keeps us honest, folks. That's how you keep people honest. You call them on their shit, and you do it in a way that they kind of have to answer. So another one of my favorites, in a similar vein of Mark Twain, but slightly more modern than Mark Twain, was Will Rogers. Now, I like Will Rogers. I thought he was awesome. And he took a similar approach using humor, but he was more directly humorous, right? You could even say was a comedian to a degree. He was on vaudeville. He was like a rodeo, Texas Jack's rodeo show cowboy. Well, he was the Cherokee Kid, by the way. He was a bronc buster, but a rope, and then he started kind of getting into. So he was a product of he was born in the late 1800s. He came into manhood in like 1900s, zeros through the teens. And he was doing, through the 19 teens, he was, cowboying and traveling the world. He was in South Africa. That's where he joined up with Texas Jack. He was a literal cowboy in Argentina. Yeah, so anyway, traveled the world, right? And you get something from that, from traveling the world. You get something from that that's, well, profound. But you also get a very strong appreciation for America. And he come to write, like in the 20s, like he was a newspaper columnist, and he did talk radio broadcasts, and his voice reached millions and millions of people during very hard times. And his humor kind of eased that angst. And he was a beloved guy. And his quote that I did just on the last episode, I never met a man I didn't like. Well, on the last episode, I talked about how that came from not a place of judgment, but a place of curiosity. And that's still correct. But I'm going to add to that and say that in the same vein that everybody's interesting in some way, well, people are pretty much the same. And in that we all have the same inherent needs. And so once you get past the titles and the politics and the pretense and the facades, most people are pretty much the same. And I know this to be true from experience. If you take an Afghan man who, well, we all have, you take a human being, two human beings, one American, one Afghan. When they're born, there's fundamentally zero difference right? And we get all these external things placed upon us. But when you sit down and break bread together and you talk about your family and you talk about work and you talk about the daily struggles, you will see that we are basically the same, minus all the external influence. Yeah, minus the external influence. And if you're an independent thinker and you're able to compartmentalize that external influence and keep it where it belongs and not become a zealot on either end of that, by the way, you'll see that we're basically the same. And most of the problems that we have today stem from the fact that we forget that. We forget that everybody is basically the same. Everybody has basically the same needs: air, water, food, shelter, love. Yeah. Understanding. Yeah, everybody has the same basic needs. And the problems stem from us forgetting it. But anyway, back to Will Rogers. Curiosity is how you get through the pretenses, isn't it? If you're patient enough to ask questions to get through the facade, yeah, that's how you do it. Now, Will Rogers was skeptical of the expert class, and he was pretty impatient with, well, fancy talk, superfluous talk, crafted up talk, much like Mom Donnie's speech. One of my favorite quotes, and this is not from Will Rogers, I want to say this is from Thomas Jefferson: never use two words when one will do. I love it. But Will Rogers believed that common sense could cut through almost all of that. Common sense. So when someone today, whether it's your favorite comedian or one of your, whatever politician you follow or whoever, when they are able to cut through the noise with a little short story, a little impactful story, or a little dry observation, yeah, they're under the influence of Will Rogers, whether they know it or not, and whether they like it or not. Yeah. So the American character and the American spirit comes from us building our own individual character in a way that we can actually live that character. Practical. I told you, Ben Franklin kept a little virtue journal. He tracked his, if you're a gym bro, you probably track your workouts. If you're a high-speed shooter, grandmaster, you probably track your range sessions. Ben Franklin kept a virtue journal. Ralph Waldo Emerson showed us that the divine shows up in nature for sure, but also in our own soul, and shapes our own moral compass. It gives us our sense of right and wrong, and it is divine, by the way. Again, whether you know it or not, or whether you like it or not. Now, you can manipulate that compass for sure with externals, but we want to avoid it. Frederick Douglass drew his strength from Christianity, for sure, and he used it, and I don't mean used it superficially, but he used Christianity to demand justice without hypocrisy, because that's what Christianity demands. So again, there's the divine showing up in this. And then Booker T. Washington taught us that our character is built through daily effort and useful work, being productive. Yeah. So those guys, what they shared was pretty simple, really. It can be made complex. All of it can be broken down and made complex, but really it's pretty simple. Good character shows up in the way you treat people and how you handle your own life. It's not abstract. So when somebody today says that, yeah, this is a person of good character, or this lady, she has integrity, they're talking about the same practical lived virtue that all these men that I talked about. That's what they're talking about. So all of the six men that I mentioned, I chose those specific six for various reasons, but they're men that I'm familiar with and have read and all those things. Also, but they were extremely and are still extremely influential. And they have left behind almost, well, some tools for us or some guidance for us. Make a daily habit of working on yourself. Yeah. Make a daily habit of working on yourself. Benjamin Franklin formed the Junto Club for that very purpose. Those men came together, and yes, over probably many pints of beer, but they came together and they talked about things that would improve their environment, their community. How can we make things better or build projects, develop systems that will be useful to the community? Yeah. It wasn't government doing that. That was just a bar full of dudes. Make a daily habit of it. Work on yourself so that you're the best version of yourself for your community. And then Emerson, along with Gavin de Becker, trust your own conscience. Trust your own instincts. For sure, work on shaping your subconscious to be, I don't want to say the word righteous, but to be good, to be fair, to be just. So yeah, righteous, I guess. So in your downtime, shape that. Take in things that help you build that. But also learn. Be willing to open yourself up. I'm going to say some profound stuff right now. Be willing to open yourself up to yourself. Yeah, do an experiment and just trust your own instinct and go do a thing. If it crashes and burns, guess what? That doesn't mean your instinct was completely wrong. Probably just the execution was. But open yourself up to yourself. Do some exercises where you have to use your instinct to make a decision. Make the decision and go with it. I'm a big believer of that, folks. Yeah, I'm a big believer of that. Now, I do believe in kind of like signs and clues and things that kind of guide. I believe in that. But I also, if I have a gut feeling about a thing, I will usually go with that gut feeling. Now, that's not to say, look, people, I have developed, this is me personally, just by the nature of my career, I have developed a decision-making process, painfully developed a decision-making process. And it went from being very formal to all the way down to very instinctual. But even during the formalized decision-making process, I still use my instincts. And then I would just examine that instinct. Okay, I take that instinct, apply it to the formal process, and then, develop it out. So yeah, be willing to do that, folks. Trust your instincts. They're probably right. Now, if you're a psychopath, that does not apply. I'm speaking in general terms to the American people. If you're a psychopath, your instincts may be wrong. Your survival instincts may be very good, but your moral compass is all messed up. All right. And moving on. They all kind of pressed upon us, but specifically Frederick Douglass and specifically Mark Twain, is the belief that true freedom has to include every citizen. Now, this process kind of developed, back in the times of slavery. What it doesn't apply to, folks, now listen to me. I'm a libertarian politically. And if you've listened to my show, I do not agree with just wild open border policy. There needs to be a process to become a citizen. You don't just show up and get a freebie. If there's no distinction or if there's no benefit of being a citizen versus being illegal, then you just crapped on every citizen in America. And you've crapped on every immigrant that came here and did things the correct way. All right. So there's procedural stuff going on there. So understand that when I say freedom applies to everybody, freedom does apply to everybody and their space. And if you're an American, you deserve all the freedoms of America. If you're illegal, you need to do the process. There's 8 million reasons why you need to be counted and you need to be legal. There's 8 million reasons why. And I'm not a big government guy. But again, our political process depends on how many humans are in America. And we don't even know that right now, folks. We don't even have the correct number. As a sovereign nation, we can't even tell you how many actual humans are in America. Yeah, about 350 or so citizens that we know about. The numbers vary on illegals, anywhere from 10 to 20 grand or 20 million ish. Who knows? That's no good. All right. That's not good either. Right. But practically speaking, freedom, you're not free to go cut someone's head off. You're not free to go rape a woman walking in the park. So do we understand, folks? Are you guys with me here? Are you understanding? Freedom don't mean the freedom to go do whatever the hell you want and violate the non-aggression principle upon other people. I've done podcasts on this, and I think I'm coming from a logical, sane perspective. All right, moving on. Man, I started to get fired up. They gave us another, and this one's a little deeper than it sounds, and I'm going to expand on it a little bit. The idea that character is built and not just claimed. Character is built and not just claimed. There are plenty of people out there claiming to be of strong character, claiming to be of strong integrity, claiming to do God's will, claiming to bring education to the people, and they're not doing those things. There are plenty of people. There's a multitude. You see them all over social media. You see them all over television. You see them all over the halls of your state house and Congress and the Senate. Washington, D.C. is ate up with them. Political activists claiming righteousness while doing evil, while doing wrong, because they believe the ends justify the means. They don't know what integrity is or character. And don't listen to me. Not only do we build our own individual character, not just in word, but in deed, don't let the group overshadow your individual character. If you're in with a group of people who present to you a thing that you instinctively know to be wrong, speak up and be willing to cut away from that group if necessary. The problem is people get intimidated by the group, so they go along to get along. Be a strong individual. Be an independent thinker. Make the decisions based on strong moral foundations. Because morals, good people are not political. All right, dang. And then the last one I'm going to say is they laid a groundwork for direct, plainly spoken word and humor to help hold people accountable, keep people honest, especially politics. Yeah, especially politics, but yeah. And I'll point out one famous incident. If you guys remember the Ricky Gervais Oscar host monologue he did, where he absolutely ripped Hollywood pedophilia and secret society, whatnot. Absolutely brilliant it was. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, that was humor, demanding accountability. And the faces on some of those people in the audience was priceless. Priceless. But yeah, that foundation was laid long before Ricky Gervais came along, long before Dave Chappelle came along. Yep. Long before George Carlin and Richard Pryor. Yeah. So that's some of the things that I think that these influential men have left for us as tasks to improve upon. Their words and their ideas have been so deeply absorbed into American life that many of us don't even know where they came from, or that they even came from someone specific. Some of these ideas just are sort of omnipresent. Like, it's not, you don't even look at it as a specific idea. It's just all encompassing. And then don't even especially know where it came from. And that's good. The good ideas should do that. The good ideas should take over like that. Because those examples of those kinds of ideas, they endure, and they have endured. And the ideas, and so here it is. Think individually within your group, whatever group you're in. You still have to think individually. You have to make a decision for yourself, always. And then here's the thing that a lot of people maybe don't do, is you then have to test your ideas against real life. Be willing to challenge your processes, your own ideas. And then be willing to grow and treat sort of your moral growth, your improvement, your personal improvement, treat it as sort of daily work. Like, I need to work on myself today. Don't get complacent thinking you're good to go. You're probably not. So yeah, look, don't take my word for it, folks. The best way to clarify all these ideas that I just threw at you and all the things I just said is to go read. And everything that these are going to be in the show notes, and everything that I just talked about, most of them are pretty short and easy reads. Yeah, most of them are pretty short and quick to read. And all of them are on the Project Gutenberg website, and most of them are free. I got links for all of these things. So yes, pick something up this week, read it, and see if it resonates. See if you can connect up what you're reading with what's going on today. Because these men that I just talked about, they didn't describe the American spirit and the American character. They created it. They helped to create it. And they passed along to us the task of keeping it alive by living it, not changing it. Not every time there's a new wave of immigrants changing our entire American identity. No. Making the American spirit, the American character, and the American identity welcoming to those who embrace it. That's what they passed along to us. And that's what I have for you today. Yeah, that's what I have for you today. I didn't think it was too political or too dark. I'm still trying to be easy breezy, and I find it difficult sometimes, but I do appreciate you guys listening. And I would absolutely love to hear your feedback, especially on the books I talked about, but other things. Topic suggestions. I would love to hear it. Topic suggestions, guest suggestions, or even if you're listening here and you think you want to be a guest, if you got something, you feel like saying, I've got a little audience, there's probably 10 or 12,000 people listening. I think that's pretty significant to me. I think it's great. So yeah. All right. Yeah, that's it. So please, as always, good people, please check out ospreyshootingsolutions.com. We have shooting events in August. 2 specifically, we have a pistol workshop, and then we have a wild card day. Please check out ospreyshootingsolutions.com/consulting. Now, I just had a conversation yesterday with a guy who is, well, I guess he's fairly prominent in his church, but about some of the offerings that I do for security consulting. And he kind of casually blew it off and said, well, no, we're not going to be able to carry guns in our church. It's not about guns, good people. It's not, the guns aren't a focus. Guns aren't, they're only a topic of conversation if your church leadership or organizational leadership wants them to be a topic of conversation. Quite the opposite. I would rather you not even consider being armed if your organization is not willing to train to the standard required, well, the standard that I set forth, to carry a gun around other humans. So yeah, it's not about the gun, folks. It's about security awareness. It's about SOPs. Do you have plans in place to react or mitigate and then maybe react to any emergency, whether it be an active killer threat or a goddamn tornado or a missing child or any number of emergencies? All right, SOP development, that's what we work on, is practical, actionable drills or actions to take in the event of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, SOP development. The threat and vulnerability assessment has nothing to do with whether or not you're carrying guns. It has to do with, well, physical security of your structure. Are you on the job? Do you know that all doors, how many doors are in your structure even? What's the most likely threat? What's the most dangerous threat? Threat and vulnerability assessment is just, well, it's an extra. We will go together and do a very in-depth walk around of your facility and then talk about ways to improve the physical security. Yeah. And then we have sort of a small bite, right? We just take a small bite and we have the security considerations. Well, lecture and open forum discussion. Yep. Lecture and open forum discussion. So that's valuable, whether you plan to go any further than that or not. That's very valuable. That's a couple of hours with us talking about all these things in relation to security. And then we have the security awareness in foreign environments modules. We have two major modules, 1 and 2, and then each major module has multiple sub-modules that can be done standalone. And that whole course, SAFE, Security Awareness in Foreign Environments, targets international travelers, missionaries, faith-based missionaries, humanitarian nonprofit organizations, and mid-sized companies who send sales teams to third world countries, independent journalists who, you got your own little podcast or your own little news thing you do on the internet, and you travel to third world country alone and unafraid. You probably need some significant training to be more safe and more aware there. And then possibly students abroad. If you're going to a place that's, well, again, even Europe is getting kind of unpredictable these days, especially England and especially France. Well, all of Europe. I say it, Spain, Italy, they're all getting very unpredictable when it comes to crime and political angst. So anyway, please look into those things. And then don't forget twoteamguys.com. All the courses at twoteamguys.com are on demand, which means you get a group of 4 or more people and request a course, and then we'll set something up individually. Those are all great courses. They're all focused on leadership development and team building, with emphasis on resilience in kind of tough conditions. Yeah, there's a little adventure involved in some of them, but it's all about making decisions under stress, working those instincts that we talked about, developing your instincts to be right more often than wrong. Because the reason we might find that our instincts are wrong is because we've developed them to be wrong. We've believed a false thing based on some irrational fear or some intangible fear. So yeah, anyway, twoteamguys.com. Those are excellent courses. And that's also where land navigation lives. Yep, and that's the one we do most often is land navigation. So check that out. And then finally, please consider giving some money to givesendgo.com/help-a-homie-fund. It's all voluntary. It's all grassroots. And it's all designed to help the lowest level person to make it through the day. Whether it's just buying them a can of SpaghettiOs, whether it's buying diapers for the baby, whether it's helping somebody get their brake fixed so they can make it to work, or even getting their bike fixed so they can make it to work. All right, so, or maybe even possibly helping someone out of a bad situation. Now, we don't have enough money in that fund to do lodging and things like that, but hopefully as we grow, we'll be able to help in bigger ways. Right now, it's just small ways, but sometimes the smallest things make some pretty big impact, folks. Even if not physically, right? Maybe emotionally and psychologically, the thing we do might be the thing that helps them to make that decision to like, okay, we're tightening this up. I'm making a move. I'm making a change. Now that also puts me out there just to be available for people. So yeah, please consider it. Help a Homie Fund. Okay, good people. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening. I love you guys.